All right, so today I wanted to talk about this article out of the Star, um, the Commie Star, I guess is another word for it. Anyway, it says Canada's billionaires have grown richer during the pandemic and calls for a wealth tax are getting louder. Um, so again, apparently it's behind a paywall, so I'm not gonna, actually turns out we're not gonna read about it. Um, but anyway, um, there's two issues here with this title and with this whole scenario. The first one is one I've talked about a lot before, is Canada's billionaires have grown richer during the pandemic, right? And it's not going to highlight there. But anyway, um, why have they grown richer? Well, they've grown richer is because the government has supported it. And I mean, this isn't the craziest thing. Well, it could be, to be honest, but it's one of the endless list of things, like just add it to the endless list of crazy things that have gone on this whole time, is that it's so ironic that the people who tend to support lockdowns are usually the more leftist types, right? And they're also the ones that are worried about the wealth gap, right? So how do they never, ever, ever, ever talk about this? Now, again, it's for obvious reasons that leftists, all they care about is power. They don't care about actually having philosophically or actual well thought out, basically using critical thinking to come to their worldviews, right? It's entirely based off power, right? If complaining about the gap between the rich and the poor can be used to further their agenda, then they're going to be all for it, right? Which is exactly why they support lockdowns, right? Because lockdowns mean a growing government, right? The government gets more power, which is exactly what they want. But or another way is taxing the rich, right? The more money the government can get their hands on, the better, right? So that's I mean, there's a lot of other things that I'll get into there, but again, when it comes to lockdowns, we know the lockdowns have made the rich richer. Now, um, and this is a lot of people probably would question this, which is very odd considering literally nobody disagrees with this. I mean, this is literally the Toronto Star reporting on this, right? It's not like this is the Rebel or someone. Like everybody agrees with this. The rich have gotten richer because of, well, during the lockdown, and I think it's very obvious it's because of the lockdowns. And why is that? Well, um, number one is the small and medium sized businesses. If a lot of those have been shut down, they've gone out of business, right? A lot of that business is going to be picked up in other ways, right? So before you go shop at a mom and pop store, well, now all of a sudden they're closed down, or maybe they weren't forced to close down, but because of the BS lockdowns, they lost too much of their business to where they couldn't afford to stay open anymore and they went bankrupt, right? And now, oh, all of a sudden you're shopping at Amazon, right? You're shopping at Walmart, right? So this is very clear why the rich have gotten richer. I think the other thing too is that um, housing prices are continuing to skyrocket, right? Who owns the majority of the real estate? Oh, it's the rich, right? So again, the lockdowns, I would say directly, but you could even argue in other ways indirectly, benefited the rich, right? And why is that? Is it's very obvious, right? I just kind of went into it. So um, I just find it very odd that people can support this stuff just completely ignore the elephant in the room, that being um, what they supported led to something that they claim to be against, right? Which is the wealth gap, right? They're always worried about the wealth gap, but yet they don't actually care about the wealth gap, because if they did, they would be against lockdowns, right? They're not at all worried about lockdowns, which is proof that they don't actually care about the wealth gap. I mean, and the same thing goes to like California, New York, these kind of places completely debunk that, right? That California is arguably the furthest left state. I mean, New York City has the most taxes. I think they actually have a city income tax, which I believe is the only city in the states that has that, right? So, um, you're already paying, I think it's like what, like 56, it's over half of your money in taxes if you're quote unquote rich in New York, but has that fixed the gap between the rich and the poor? Again, California is up over 50% too. Is that No, California has the second highest rate of poverty. California, again, I'm not 100% sure on this because I don't know the number. I do know that they have the second highest rate of poverty. Um, but I would be very shocked if they didn't have the biggest gap between the rich and the poor if you consider Silicon Valley and Beverly Hills and all these kind of places, right? So again, like, do these leftist policies work? Well, absolutely not. Like, of course they don't. They haven't done anything. If anything, they've made the problem worse. In fact, I would argue they've made the problem worse. So this is, like I say, it's just astounding that people, ignore that basic fact that these leftist policies have only made the problem worse, right? And the reality behind the quote unquote the wealth gap and all this stuff, the reality behind it is that if you don't allow rich people to exist, then it's only going to drag down the middle class and the poor as well. Like, it would be the equivalent to saying, um, I want the average person to become a better hockey player, but we're also not going to allow the NHL to exist. That would be the same. That it's pretty much the same as what we're doing as a society, right? In that we are crippling the best of the best as much as we possibly can in a veiled attempt to help the people in the middle. But the problem is that doesn't work, right? So again, like, it's just basic economics as well. But again, like, the point remains is that if you're not willing to allow, like, this is another reason why the leftists are insane is, oh, there no one should be a billionaire. Like, why do you need $1 billion? Well, that's besides the point, right? It's besides the point. Um, Number one, because why would anyone, like, I mean, people would probably still do it, but you would drive down entrepreneurship to a pretty large degree if you said, yeah, no more billionaires, right? No more billionaires. And the other reason, too, is that the even better reason, I believe, is um, someone like Elon Musk, right? Prime example. Do you think that if he was given $1 billion or the government was given $1 billion, who's going to spend that money more efficiently? Well, it's not even a question, right? It's going to be Elon Musk, and it's going to be Elon Musk by a mile, right? I mean, prime example with the what was it, the going to the moon or going to space? Like, he did it like what for way cheaper and way faster than the government would have did, right? So in other words, if you give Elon Musk a bill, now I'm not saying you give him money, you just don't tax extra away. He's going to spend it in a more efficient way. Let's say you do have a wealth tax, 10% on any, or whatever the number is. Let's just say it's going to be $1 billion. Okay. Elon Musk probably creates, I don't know, let's just make up numbers, 1,000 jobs with that $1 billion, right? The government probably creates 500, right? Because when the government gets money, well, what needs to happen? The bureaucrats need to take their cut. A lot of it usually just magically disappears, like Catherine McKenna is proving, right? That just billions of dollars, ooh, what do you know? It just disappeared, right? So again, and this is the craziest thing too, that everybody agrees with that. The problem is that the leftists are stupid enough to think that, oh, it only happens on the right. Like, this is, again, like, you talk to these NDP supporters in Alberta, they think that it is literally impossible for a leftist to do shady stuff when they're in politics, right? But that's all Jason Kenney cares about, right? That's all Jason Kenney cares about. That's all Shandro cares about. That's all these other people care about, right? Like, again, like, the truth is in the middle. The problem is that politicians, the way the current system is set up, it's usually not the best of the best of people that are drawn to become politicians, especially at the high levels. Usually, because there's obviously some exceptions. So the problem is that we get the most corrupt pieces of garbage who usually become politicians, right? And that, again, like, and again, a lot of people were skeptical about this going forward. But again, look at the last year. You thought Jason Kenney was who he was an improvement over Rachel Notley? Well, not really. Rachel Notley was a disaster, but so is Jason Kenney now. Same goes for Doug Ford, right? People like, oh, you shouldn't be giving all the blame to Kenney and to Ford, and I agree with to an extent, but Jason Kenney and Doug Ford have done just as much damage to Alberta and Ontario respectively than Justin Trudeau has, right? Like they're you could have the carbon tax at 10 times higher than it is right now. It wouldn't do as much damage to Alberta as what Jason Kenney's done with lockdowns. I'm not saying I support the carbon tax. Again, I've made many videos about how stupid it is, but again, I'm just trying to make a point here. And this is the worst thing about things these days is that neither political side is going to fix this stuff. I mean, in reality, a free market would fix. It wouldn't fix the problem in the way people think it would, but it would fix it. It would cut down on poverty, right? And this is the problem with leftists is that they're in this stupid worldview that they seem to think that if rich people get double as rich and the average person gets 50% richer, well then we can't do that, right? We can't do it. Well, everyone still has more money or more wealth because just physical money doesn't actually change it, but more wealth, let's say. And that's the problem with the leftists. And that's the easiest way to fix the problem, too. The idea that we can make poor people 50 times more wealthy, but rich people no more wealthy, it's it's basically impossible to do that without communism. It's basically impossible to do that without communism. I don't think I can stress that enough, to be quite honest. And this is why these leftist systems and policies always fail. They never work. Because, again, like I said, it's we are trying to make the average beer league hockey player comparable to Connor McDavid. Like, this is what we are trying to do when we're trying to fix the wealth gap, right? People need to think about it like that. Like, just imagine how much damage you need to do, or how manipulated the economy and just everything needs to be to make the average beer league hockey player comparable to Connor McDavid. It's basically not possible, short of completely destroying the whole thing. Like there's almost nothing you could do, short of saying, you literally you got to play with your eyes closed, basically. Like, and that is what we're trying to do. So, and this is the other problem too. Like, why do we need to fix the wealth gap? Why is that such a big issue? And what I'm getting at here is that why should the worry should be, how do we bring up the poor and the middle class? Who cares about the rich? Like, who cares? Right? Like, seriously, who cares about the rich? The goal should be entirely, how do we bring up the poor and the middle class? Now, again, like I said, the leftists would respond to that, oh, we just got to tax them more. Well, there's no data that shows that that's a solution long term. Number one, in that even if you taxed all wealth at 100% above $1 billion, it wouldn't even come close to fixing the problems that we're facing. And again, that's not even realistic. Even if you wanted to do that, it's not realistic. So the problem is that there's no amount of regulation, there's no amount of new taxes that are going to get us out of the problems we're in. The only way we can get out of the problems we're currently in is, number one, we have to stop spending more money than we have. That's one that we absolutely positively have to do. There's no question about it. And number two, deregulate. Number three, um, stop. I just think stop the crazy leftist policies and um, actually go with the free market. Again, this is one of the most laughable things that you hear these days is that, oh, the states is a free market. Erin O'Toole, the Jason Kenney types, they believe in free markets. No, they don't. They believe in free markets compared to a socialist, but not compared. Like, show me one major thing that, I mean, maybe oil and gas, but that's an exception to the rule. Like, of all the things that Milton Friedman and these kind of people talked about, Jason Kenney and those people are polar opposites. Like, come on. You think Milton Friedman, you think Thomas Sowell, these kind of people, you think they would support lockdowns? I mean, Aaron O'Toole's even further left than Jason Kenney, and Jason Kenney is shown to be rather moderate, right? People think that because he doesn't support completely destroying the oil and gas sector because of climate paranoia, that oh, that makes him far right. No, it doesn't, right? No, it doesn't. The vast majority of politicians that don't live in Canada, the States, and Europe agree with that, right? It's really only a Western thing that we're going to destroy our oil and gas sector in a veiled attempt to fix the climate change, right? Like it's stupid. Um, so again, and this is another one of the most frustrating things about this whole situation is that the solutions to these problems really aren't that hard. There's going to be a little bit of pain and suffering, but there's going to be pain and suffering no matter what. This is one of the once you debunk all the arguments, this is the one argument they always bring up is, oh, if we ended the welfare state, if we actually spent within our means, the poor people would suffer. But again, it's just a lack of critical thinking, a lack of basic economic understanding, and that um, if something mathematically can't continue, it's only a matter of time until it physically won't continue anymore. So there will be a point in time in which the entire system goes belly up. Oh, and wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden we don't have enough money to pay for healthcare, to pay for old age security, to pay for all these socialist systems. And because we have no alternatives in Canada, right? We have no healthcare alternative. We have no alternatives to a lot of these things. Things are just going to go belly up, right? It'd be one thing if we actually had some private competition when it comes to healthcare, for example, but we have nothing, right? So again, like again just debunking that whole people are going to suffer if we cut back on the welfare state or end the welfare state. Well, it's going to end one way or the other. Like again, it's great. Like, do people not understand basic math? Like the government had to run a $500 billion deficit just to pay for all the free stuff they gave out over the last year. The amount of new debt doubled last year. Like the government of Canada and the government of the States as well. Canada is even worse, I think. Again, the government is doing the equivalent to having maxed out credit cards, having every single line of credit you can possibly get, second mortgage, tapping into all your equity, like, payday loans. The government, it's everything, right? And they'll be able to maintain it long. I'm not saying that everything's going to collapse very soon. It very well could. It wouldn't surprise me if this stuff lasts another generation or two, to be honest. But it will collapse at some point because, again, if you understand basic mathematics, if you're constantly needing to run bigger and bigger deficits to sustain the country's lifestyle, it's only a matter of time until it's not sustainable anymore, right? This stuff is very basic stuff. I'm not sure why it's so confusing for people. Now, it's confusing because people have been lied to in public schools and in the mainstream media for generations now, but you'd think you'd be able to, more people would be able to figure it out because I don't think that many people, I mean, there's a lot of brainwashed people, but I didn't think it was as much as what it actually is, right? So, yeah, like I say, in a nutshell, um, it just astounds me how people can ignore that the lockdowns have made the rich richer and how they claim to care about the rich getting rich or unjustly rich, the wealth gap. It just astounds me how they ignore that. And number two, it astounds me how they ignore that a wealth tax will not fix the problems that we face. In fact, it'll hardly even make a dent, right? It'd be one thing if it would pay for like 90% or something like that, but it's like 10%, if that, right? And the other reason too why new taxes make absolutely no sense. Like again, there's a constant talk of a PST in Alberta right now. It would be one thing if the government said, okay, we're going to put this new tax in, and what we're going to do is we're going to cap spending. We're going to have no new spending until the debt's paid off. I could understand that. At least I could respect them if they did that. But they're not going to do that. They'll put a new tax in, and they'll use it to buy votes. They're not going to use it to pay down debt. They'll use it to buy votes, right? They'll put in this wealth tax, or they'll put in a PST that's going to generate $1 billion, let's say, and they just increase spending by $1 billion. It's not like it's not going to fix the problem at all, right? It's the equivalent to having your credit card maxed out, you never planning on paying it down, and the credit card company saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, we just increased your limit." Okay, well, it doesn't fix your problem, doesn't fix your debt problem. You're just gonna max it out again, right? Like it makes no sense. So anyway, that's what I wanted to bring out today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you check out those links below. Follow me on those other platforms if you haven't already. If you want to donate, you could do that as well. Again, I would very much appreciate whatever support I can get, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe and stay tuned for more.